Morning. How we doing? How's not having to worry about your project anymore going? Morning all. Welcome to the stream. Loving life. No more project stress. Yeah, just report stress. See, before you had project stress and report stress. Now you've just got report stress. Also, final exam stress coming up for other subjects. You're basically there, right? You're on the home stretch. Cool. Yeah, chuck report questions in now. Go for it. I don't mind. 10 out of 10 rubber chickens. Okay, not a metric I've been rated on before, but I'm excited I'm getting 10 of them. If there are tables used in an appendix, should they be included in the list of tables? It's a good question. I was asked a similar one about figures as well. I would say no. Um, Having one or two of them in there probably isn't the end of the world. In fact, I wouldn't even notice. But if you've got like 20 or 30 because your appendix is a data dump, I wouldn't put them in that scenario. That does to some extent depend on what it is, but yeah, I wouldn't totally clutter up my list of tables because I dumped 20 of them in an appendix. Same goes for figures. If your one of your appendices is here's 50 different sketches that I made or my team made of prototypes, I wouldn't bother putting that into my list of figures. Do I have your report, Scarlett? Are you one of the ones who sent it in? Cool. I've got yours. We'll have a look at it. I'll have a look specifically for that then. If it's in there, we'll see what happens. Um, Rowan, what project are you in? All right, Abby, if you have, say, for example, your intro and it's broken into 1.1, 1.2, yep. Can you have text under section 1 and not within the smaller subsections? As in, sort of an intro into the subsections. Yes. Yes, you can. Um, and I actually personally quite like that style. I would say either option would be acceptable. Um, but yes, having, introduction and then two or three sentences is often accepted. I see it more commonly in big reports where you're going to put your intro in, and then it's going to be 30 or 40 or 80 pages long. Having a couple of sentences, even a couple of paragraphs to be like, look, this is what's coming, um, is totally fine. Totally fine. For my appendix, can I upload a photo of the calculations for things, or should I type it up using the equation setting? Typing it up is better. Always. Typing it up is always better. In the event of you don't need this, you should never look at it. It doesn't even need to be here, but I'm chucking it in an appendix just to be safe. Particularly if you've typed up like the typical equations and put them into your report. Here is the equation for this, here is the equation for this, here are the outcomes when I solved it, and it's just working, it's just pages of algebra. Yeah, I don't have a problem with a couple pages of algebra going into an appendix as an image, but the equation should be introduced correctly in the report. Robot, I'd go narrow margins. Go narrow margins. Will we lose marks in our report if our final projects didn't go well? For civil, but more broadly, the report is about your evaluation and your justification. So if you have good engineering reasons as to why you made the decisions you made, and then you have a good evaluation of why it failed, then you can get 100% in your report. If you didn't basically follow the engineering method, if you didn't have justifications, if you didn't have good engineering behind the decision making process, well, then you're not going to have those things to talk about in your report. But just because a project exploded doesn't necessarily mean anything with your report. As long as you can explain, can justify, can evaluate correctly, you should be able to get 100% in your report still, provided you went through the steps that I taught you to go through in the engineering design process. Lots of projects totally tank it, and that's totally fine. Robot projects will be a great example of loads of people who did heaps of work and then they turned the wrong way out of the garage and everything collapsed. But as long as they had the engineering method behind them, they're still very much capable of getting full marks. Feel I have more to write about because our project went poorly? Totally, 100%. That allows you to do evaluation and justification, right? For most of particularly the civil projects, we try to test them until we break something on them so that you have something to talk about, right? It's so much easier to talk about failures than successes. I have a table that summarizes all team members' milestones and offhandedly reference the fact that a full list of projects can be seen in the appendix. Cool. How do I reference it properly in text? Pretty much exactly what you've said there. A full list of progress can be seen in Appendix B. It's all you have to do. By the way, I'm going to do a bunch of questions. Just for those of you who are in now and wondering what's going on, I'm going to answer any burning questions anybody has. I'll do 5 minutes of admin, and then like 5 minutes of housekeeping. And then I've got 3 reports to go through with you that we'll sort of go through and break down. All right. So that's like the running thing for the stream. So if you've got report questions now, chuck them up. We'll have a quick chat about them. And then maybe we can specifically look for some of these things in some of the reports that we go through. So for the civil report, do I have to report the initial design, the design of our prototype, and then a second design if we have more time? In that case, which design do I have to evaluate? Okay, so you're evaluating your solution. Be aware your solution is something that came from hopefully many, many designs being brought together to create a final solution. That's what you're evaluating. So you will have had prototypes, you will have had many concepts, some detailed designs, some prototypes, and one final solution that probably pulled from a whole bunch of them. So you're evaluating aspects of the solution, and yes, you should detail that process of how you got to there. Is it okay if my justifications are integrated with my detailed description of the final prototype? It can be. That's a very difficult way to do it. Just make sure it's very clear to a reader who doesn't understand your project very well. Then yes, it's totally fine. Um, and depending on how you've structured it, that may be the most appropriate way to do it. I haven't seen your report. That can be totally appropriate. Just make sure that it's clear when you make these decisions that there was some engineering logic behind that decision making process. Is it okay to use team members' names in some places within the design process? Currently got names over our initial designs in a figure. Yeah, it is. Bear in mind, though, you are reporting on behalf of your team. You're not reporting as a team member who was part of this. You are reporting for the entire team. So you're trying to give your client the understanding of what the team did, not what you did as part of it. So you should be reporting as though you all were one uniform whole, um, and you're reporting on behalf of everyone. So you don't want to separate things out to be like, this is what I did and this is what the others did. However, if you've got initial sketches, and on the top of the sketch that Dylan drew, he wrote Dylan's sketch, that's totally fine. It doesn't have to be anonymous, and it can be used as an identifying feature, and that may make a lot of sense. But remember, you are reporting on behalf of your team. How much is the total weight of the 200-litre tank? 240-ish kilos. Should subsections 1.1, 1.2 be indented? They can be. I like an indentation there, but I haven't specified anything super strict either way. What is the correct order in the report for the abstract, table of contents, list of figures, and list of tables? That order. Put them in that order. What assumptions are there for the robot? Many, many thousands of assumptions. I would go back to the models and assumptions video that I made you all the way back in week 2 and have a look at that, and then think of how many more hundreds of those there were by the time you finished your project. For the robot project, would I have to reference the lab docs if I say that the IR sensors were mounted on the robot according to what was in the lab document? Yes, 100% you would have to reference them. Basically, if you're wondering about whether you need to reference something, assume the standard statement that I've given all of you this year, which is, I don't believe you. Your client is going to say, I don't believe you. I disagree. Back it up. Do you have of um, a way of convincing me that that is the truth? So, yeah. It was done this way in the lab document. I don't believe you. Reference, then I can go and look that reference up and be like, oh, okay, well, now I'm fighting the lab doc, I'm not fighting you. So, should I be using personal pronouns or refer to my group as the group did this? You should be trying to avoid that language regardless. You should be discussing facts, not giving me a story. So you shouldn't be saying I's and you shouldn't be saying the group did this. This was done is a better way of saying that. But yeah, you probably want to just remove that language wherever you can. Do we refer to our team as the team? Again, you can, but you probably shouldn't be using that type of language anyway. Again, this is not a recount of we showed up on Tuesday and we did this and then we did this. That's not how it works. It is a series of statements of fact. The person reading this hasn't taken Edge 1500. Do we need to explain discipline-specific topics to understand the report? Yes. Yes, you should be. So that's part of your literature review in your introduction, or you establishing the state of the art. That's basically what your introduction is. It's going over that content such that somebody who is newish to the field, so an educated person, they're a university student or something like that, but they didn't do your version of Eng 1500. So anything you learnt specifically in there, you'll need to bring them up to speed on. And that's how it always is. That's still how it is when I write papers and things like that. You always do that. Your introduction establishes the state of the art. All of the things that somebody would need to know in order to understand the results and discussion. Cool. All right. So Um, personally, I would just call it introduction, and I don't even bother breaking these sections up. But you can call it literature review. You could call it a theory section. Technical information isn't a common term. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's an incorrect term, but it's certainly not a common term. I would call it literature review, probably. Well, I would call it introduction, but if you wanted something more specific, literature review is the more commonly accepted term. Should we be referencing the workshop slides even though our reader may not have access to them? I want you to clarify that with Simon. Um, yeah, I would recommend that you would, but you make a good point. Your reader won't have access to them, so I would clarify that with Simon. The better thing to do is go and find other sources that are in the public domain that cover that content. There's nothing that Simon showed you that, he derived from first principles of the universe, right? Everything that he showed you about radiation and thermal conductivity and all of those sorts of things exist in the public domain as well. So you could potentially find additional resources to reference in that case. For the teamwork and self-reflection part, do we include questions and our answers? Yes, please. Include the questions and your answers in the self-reflection part. So basically just copy, paste those questions in, and then just answer them under it. It makes it much faster to mark in that scenario. Cool. What I'm going to do is a couple of minutes of housekeeping, and then I'll answer a bunch more questions, and then we'll start opening up some reports, okay? So feel free if you want to chuck some more questions in the chat. No dramas. I'm going to ignore them for a minute or two. Go through just a little bit of housekeeping for a few minutes. I'll answer those questions. We'll be all good. All right. So demo week is finally over. We had our final testing yesterday afternoon with the arrows, and 7 days of testing was just amazing. I had the best time. It was so cool to get in and see your projects and be able to see the excitement when things worked. It was just incredible. I had the absolute best time. I know that some parts of demo week are very intense, but yeah, it was incredible. I know that things didn't always work out perfectly for everybody as well, and some people had a little bit of disappointment in demo day. But don't worry about it. Your workshop leaders have been working with you for 12 weeks. They know how much effort you've put in, and if something went horribly wrong on demo day, we will use a different marking criteria to evaluate you based on how much effort you've put in over the last 12 weeks. But that's not that many of you. Most of you, it was an incredible week, and I had the best time. And you guys should be really, really proud of yourself. Robot Flex is just my Project Flex is just my favorite thing. I love it. Every time somebody chucks something up in Project Flex and was in there, it's amazing to see all of that stuff. So really, really well done. Could not be happier with how demo week went for 2021. It was incredible. All right, boring assessment-y stuff. So going through your old assessments, Blackboard is all messed up at the moment, and I don't know why it got messed up, but it's all messed up. All the assessments are in the wrong order. Things are getting shown as percentages that should be getting shown as numbers. Somehow it got totally messed up. So don't stress about it. I'll fix it over the next week or so, and I'll get it sorted for you, okay? Assessment 1 isn't even appearing in Blackboard at the moment for some reason. Don't worry about it. I will add it manually when I put grades in. So the way that it works, so you know, is I download everything at the very end of this. I'll download everything from Blackboard, put it into a spreadsheet, calculate a final grade, and then take that grade and put it into a different spreadsheet. So if Blackboard is missing something, I can manually add it at the end. Don't worry. All right, it's totally fine. So as long as I'm aware if something is missing out of Blackboard, I can fix it as a course coordinator at my discretion. So assessment one's being weird, and if it continues to be weird, I'm just going to add it manually at the end. Assessment two, everybody should be all done at this stage. I know there's 3 of you or 4 of you who I still need to get a mark for, but other than that, it should be perfect. So if your assessment 2 isn't right, let me know. Assessment 3, assessment 3 was the quiz, remember? If you had a late submission, it still needs to be marked. I have to mark them question by question, so I've just been doing them in my downtime. It just takes me like an hour to mark each one. So anytime I get an hour, I mark another one. So they'll get done. They'll get done by mid next week. Don't worry about it. If it hasn't been marked by mid next week, please let me know. I'm going to scale some of those marks because there was 1 or 2 questions in there that had a bit of ambiguity in them, and that needs to be fixed, and those marks need to be scaled. So you will have a scaled version of those marks entered into Blackboard at some stage. Hopefully this time next week, maybe the end of next week, that'll all be sorted. For assessment 4, that's your milestones. Grades will hopefully start appearing this week. And again, same deal. They'll probably start appearing over the next week or so. I need to meet with markers and stuff before they put them in just to make sure it's fair across the board. So you shouldn't have any marks yet, but you'll get some soon. Friday next week, if you don't have grades by then, just flag it with me, let me know, and I'll chase it up. All right, cool. So that's all of the assessment stuff. If you have any questions about other assessments, please chuck them up in the chat or email me about them or Discord message me about them. There are no classes this week. I know your timetable says you have week 13 classes. You do not have week 13 classes. It's all good. You don't have to worry about it. And assessment 7 is just part of the report. It's the reflection at the end of the report. It is not an in-class thing. I know the course outline says that it's an in-class thing. The course outline is wrong. Don't worry about it. It's just the appendix A to your report. And then you should be all good. All right, so that's all I had from a housekeeping perspective. I've got 3 reports to have a look at over the next hour and a half. Just smash out these couple of questions here, and then I'll start opening up some reports. We did that one. Since we have also gone over technical information for someone who wasn't here in the workshops in our first report, can we use the same stuff in our final report? Yes, you can. So you can reuse components of your first report in this report. Go for it. I'm totally happy for you to do that. I deliberately structured them that way. They are meant to work like that. Please be aware, I am giving you permission to do that explicitly. That is against normal university policy. Normally, you cannot get the same marks for the same work twice. It's considered self-plagiarism, and it is not a thing you're allowed to do. So ordinarily, don't feel that you can just take an assignment and resubmit parts of it, but I'm specifically giving you permission to do that in this report. So yeah, if you did a great job of your first report, go for it. Civil, must I include the justification at the end with the evaluation, or can I include the justification in the thinking process for the initial design and then evaluate it later on? Yeah, you can do that, however makes the most sense for you. D-Cell, when should we find out our project testing mark and the salt concentrations of the water we produced? I'm going to try and get you some things today, all right? So I'll get you hopefully water content today and salt concentration tomorrow, just based on how long it takes to evaporate, okay? Cool. All right, so let's open up some of these. All right, so I've got a couple of reports here. This one I think is a civil report. No, okay, these are in slightly the wrong order. Hold on. I want to open up my civil report first. Cool. How is that text size on screen? Should I zoom in or is that readable? Zoom. Zoom in. All right. How does that look? Is that better? For the mechanical project, should be referring to the power output from test day. The power output was pretty meaningless. You can state it like fine, totally not a problem. State your power output, but eh, don't stress about it. It's not that important. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a civil report. Yeah, civil report. So this is their abstract. So if we start from the beginning, they've got their title page. There's some numbers here that I deleted for the interest of keeping it as anonymous as possible. But title page, good. Um, it has the correct file name, which is good. So all of these things are good. Um, and then we have our abstract here. So generally we want to write our abstracts last, or at least very close to last. Now this report is semi-finished, so it makes sense that they've had a crack at an abstract. Give this a read, and then throw out any feedback that you can think of, or any comments about this as an abstract. Should the abstract be in the table of contents even though it comes before it? Yeah, it's pretty commonplace to have it in your table of contents. Is there anything that you think is good about this abstract? Anything that you think that's raising any red flags about it? There's some stuff I've deleted here. This had a thing. This had a thing. Whatever. Yep. Justified text. Fair enough. It's a good call. Other comments? What's your comment about 30 by 30 millimeters? That this is an X? And you're saying it should be a symbol? I don't have a problem with the fact that they refer to this specific thing in here. Remember, an abstract is basically there for somebody who's reading all of them to flick through them. The fact that they named their group and their workshop, I actually don't mind. One of the things that I like about this abstract is that it does have numbers in it. I think that's the most important aspect. Well, okay, some good things about this abstract is it is an abstract. It's not an introduction. It's an actual abstract. So, okay, this is maybe a touch long, telling us what's coming in the report. And I think the wording isn't perfect, but this is fine. It tells us basically what the product was supposed to do. Nice, simple language. Tells us what's basically was required and is going to be in the report. Just fine. Totally fine thing to have in there. And then it gives us the numbers that we need. And this is important. This is what we should have in an abstract. We should be direct and we should have numbers in it. And then we have basically our summary and the thing they want me to take away from this at the end. I quite like this. I don't think the wording is perfect, and um, it has a few technical concerns, and yes, this is one of them. But overall, this is fairly good, and it's a fairly good length. Yes, the abstract will be slightly different for different projects, but this is a reasonable length for an abstract of a report this size. There's actually quite a lot to like about this. Yes, I have a few concerns about the numbers that are in here. I really like that it has numbers, but some things that really worry me. This 10.441. You only ever quote a number good to your worst assumption. Okay? And this is implying that you had 5 specific figures of detail on every single assumption that you made in this entire project. Not even close. All right? So 10 maybe would be about the best that you could realistically state. Okay? Don't do this unless you can guarantee to me that you have this level of accuracy. Okay? So I wouldn't necessarily say approximately in here. I would just quote it to less significant figures. The structure can hold up to 125 liters of water while can hold a maximum weight of 2,703. What I believe is this is from a simulation, and I would definitely not state this in this way. So the simulation says it could hold this, but I guarantee that your physical testing didn't suggest that. So I would definitely not be phrasing this like this in an abstract. This basically means you are guaranteeing to me that I could put 2.7 ton on it and it would be fine, and you do not have the evidence to suggest that. So, like, it's good that there are numbers in here, but there's a couple of question marks over what some of them are. But overall, this is excellent, and this is a very, very good start. You definitely wouldn't explain gravitational head in here, not in an abstract. So, does gravitational head need to be explained? Yes, very much so. Does it get explained in an abstract? No, it does not. An abstract is not the place for that. Our introduction would definitely be our place for that, okay? So when we get into our introduction and we start talking about things like scope or technical information skills learnt maybe, that's where we would need to explain things like gravitational head and what that means. All right, so other things to like, we've got Roman numerals, which is excellent. We've got a table of contents. This all looks good. Cool. Now, there is a known issue with this, and this is something that the author asked me to help, and it's their list of figures is all messed up, and we'll see why that happens later. How do you make a table of contents? Super easy. This is a good one. So all you have to do is basically come in to references, where is it? Table of contents. There it is. Bam. And then you can come in and you can pick. So you can customize if you need to, but you're probably going to be okay with one of the defaults. And you just bang in a table of contents. As long as you have correctly used your styles to put all your headings in throughout your entire report, it'll be all automatic for you. The same goes for your list of tables and your list of figures. References, insert table of figures, and then you can pick whether you want them to be figures, equations, tables, listings, whatever you want them to be. I might have made listings, I think, manually. But you can dump in these automatically. And it's actually the fact that they did that is why this one's all messed up. And I'll show you why it's messed up. It's actually got nothing to do with the way they put their list of figures in. It's got everything to do with the way they captioned their figures in their report. If the structure withstood the 125 load, can we say something like can withstand more than 125? I wouldn't. I would say it withstood the 125 load because that's what you know. statements of fact, right? So the abstract goes at the end of the report in front of the references. No, we're at the start of the report. The abstract goes at the start. These are not references. This is a table of contents. References go at the end. If having the report text in numbered lists, should every step be indented? It can be. It doesn't have to be. I have no problems with this. I think that this is fine. I don't have any issues with the fact that this is not indented. I also wouldn't have any issues if it was. Oh, that it wouldn't bother me either way. All right, so into here. Some things not to like so much about this report. This is not a scope. Scope has numbers in it. A scope bounds our problem. All right. So there is some information further down about these constraints. This is partly what your scope is. Okay. A scope bounds your problem. This does not bind my problem in any way, shape, or form. This is not a scope. All right. Um, so that's something that you need. You probably need a bit more introduction in here. Um, Again, there's the standard issues like it's not justified text and that type of thing, which is easy enough to fix. The spacing's also slightly wrong. So, whilst it is double spaced, I believe, it is double spaced. That is 8 point after. Okay, so they've got all of that correct. That's fine. I would probably come to your headings and I would probably put in a spacing after as well. I just think that this looks more consistent. It's probably not the end of the world, but that's probably worth doing as well. If you've made an improvement since your pitch, you put the improved numbers into your report. Yeah, abstracts are the last thing you write, but they go first in your report. Referencing system is up to your particular discipline. All the different disciplines have specified their own or left it up to you. If you've clarified anything throughout the project at any stage, you put the clarified details in the scope. All right, so the scope defines and bounds your problem. Everything that you've learned, it's not necessarily the scope that you were given from the project brief. It's everything that you've learned in the project so far that bounds your problem. So you would know that your project briefs were not actually very definitive at all. They didn't bind your problem anywhere near as much as most people thought that they did. So there's actually huge amounts of flexibility. So everything that you've learned over the last 12 weeks that helps define your solution space goes in your scope. Okay? Cool. Cool. Like, this is decent stuff to have in there. It just needs more. So if we scan through this, we'll go down and find some of the issues in this report. So there's a lot to like in here. Units are well formatted. A lot of this is very consistent. It's very nice. These are not assumptions. This is not what we mean by assumptions. I'd very strongly advise you to go back to the models and assumptions lecture from week 2 before you write this section. All of this is basically just either scope or aspects of the project brief. They're very much not what we mean when we say assumptions. So 100% advise you to go back to your week 2 models and assumptions videos and have another look at them to make sure you understand what we mean when we say assumptions in here. This one is probably a reasonable assumption to have in there, but all the rest of it's not realistically what you want. Abby, what project are you in? Some people are allowing dot points, other are not. I would allow dot points, but some projects have specifically said no. Scrolling through here, this all looks okay. A scope and problem identification. Problem identification is broad brush. Scope is numbers. Okay? Problem identification is description. Scope is numbers. Medical, dot points will be okay for medical. No dramas there, you're all good. We had a part of our project that didn't work. Um, do we say an improvement is to ditch them, or should we act that we weren't there? You should definitely not act like they were not there. If you did a thing, you should talk about that thing and why it was a good idea or a bad idea. There's nothing wrong with saying we tried this, we weren't sure how it was going to go. Oh, it went real badly. Totally fine. Dot points for mechanical. Yep, definitely dot points for mechanical. Okay, this is a common issue that I've seen through a lot of this, and it's missing the full stops. So if these are sentences, then they're sentences. All right. If this is a full sentence, it gets a full stop. If it's a fragment, it doesn't. But if it's a full sentence, it should be given a full stop. Okay. So remember your full stops and your dot points if you're writing full sentences out here. It's good. Some things to like here are table captions A, exist, and B, are above the table, which is excellent. Tables with no vertical lines, excellent. There's a lot to like in here. Your captions are, I think, have been specified that they should be the same style as body text. They may not have for civil, I'm not entirely sure. So you might want to modify this. So this is your caption style that I'm modifying. So you can make them times, you can make them 12, leave them italics or get rid of it or whatever. Okay? And then that will update all of your captions all at once. All right? For discipline-specific stuff, you will need to work out the most appropriate place to put it in your report. Some of those things can be integrated into other sections. Others will just be standalone sections, and you'll just put them somewhere appropriate as a standalone section. You figuring out how you lay it out in a logical way is part of the assessment item. So give it some thought. Where do you think it's most appropriate to go? Chuck it in there. Cool. This is all pretty good. I quite like this as a way of covering a whole bunch of different topics in really condensed format. I quite like this style. It's not always an acceptable style, but I think for this is quite nice. I really quite like the way that this is done. You can reference in here instead of in here, by the way. So that is an option. If you're using stuff in a table and you've predominantly pulled them all from one location, you could reference in the table caption instead. I don't have a problem with this. I think this is totally fine. But if you reference in the table caption, that might also be acceptable. If we made a performance criteria table with numbers and weightings, do we have to explain how to add the numbers up? I'd put a brief explanation in of how it works. Yeah, I think that would be a good idea to explain. I don't have to necessarily be able to use it, but just understand the way that you did it. Okay, now we come to a big issue with this report and the main reason why the table of figures is messed up, and it's because of the way these figures are actually laid out in the report. This is not the correct way to lay out figures. You're going to flick. So what you've got here is three images that are all sort of part of one whole on a page together. And we see it again later down here. And we see it again down here. So the way that these are laid out is not the correct way to lay them out. Few reasons. A, it's really hard. This is like a super difficult way to lay figures out on your page. B, it creates pagination issues like this. See how it's split this set of figures across two pages? We don't like that. That's not good. And C, it messed up your table of list of figures. What you want to do instead, here's one I prepared earlier. If I flick to this report, is another report that we'll have a look at later. Look at that. Look how beautiful this looks. So it's four parts. They've assembled them in PowerPoint. and then they've come in and they've just numbered them A, B, C, and D, and then they've put them in as one image. And this just looks this looks beautiful. This looks publication worthy. This is great. So that's really nice. They've done it again here. They've done it there. Look at that. That's incredible. Okay, so that's what you want. That's how you want to put multi-part figures into your report. You take them, you put them into another program like PowerPoint. So it's super easy to do. I've got PowerPoint open. Let's just home, new slide, bam. Let's come back to this report that we were looking at. Let's grab a whole bunch of these figures from up here, so wherever we were up to. Copy into PowerPoint, bang, go over there. Copy, bang, copy. And then you can, line them up, you can resize them, you can do whatever you need to do with them to make them all be nice and the way you want them to be. You can insert labels. You can call them, A. It's often quite nice in this scenario to format, shape, fill, white. And that way you just get a nice white background. Copy, paste, paste. Line them up nicer than I'm about to line them up. Make sure they look really good. However you want to do it, and then you can take this and you can file, save as, and you can save it as an image, all right? And then you can save that slide. Yeah, okay, whatever. As a specific image, and then you can make really, really nice figures like this. Okay, so they're beautiful. That's what you want. Once you've got them, you put in one caption that talks about all 4 parts of it. And once you've done that, that will fix your table of your list of figures issues up. All right, and all of those problems will disappear for you. So the reason you have all of those problems was actually a result of the way that you were putting figures in the first place. So that should solve all of that. Also, you need some text in here. I don't know what these things are. What are they? Why are you showing them to me? Give me a paragraph or 2 of text before you throw a whole bunch of different figures at me. Always. No matter how obvious it may seem to you, do not launch into this without having a bit of text in first. How do we go about establishing the state of the art? Is there an international body that keeps track of everything? Yes, Google is the international body that keeps track of everything. Also, are we establishing state of the art in regards to our client and their AI related work, or are we establishing state of the art in regards to robot and their navigation? You're establishing what needs to be done to understand your results and discussion. Okay? So it is actually fairly commonplace to write your results and discussion first and then go back and write the introduction that is required to understand them, is generally how it's done. Enough so that a new reader understands the problem, why it's relevant, and how it works. Cool. Descriptions of these designs, yes, that's fine. I don't have any huge issues with the way that that's laid out. That's all fine as well. Again, obviously the figures need to be tidied up. I don't think I had too much else to say. Okay. So this is another thing. All right, we come down to these figures here. You want these figures to be centered. All right. Oh, okay. All right. So, okay, to help explain this a little bit better, what they've done is come into here and they've put a bunch of circles in Word to highlight key things, which is fine. The problem is that now if I move this, if I try and move this over for some reason, because it's supposed to be centered, these don't move with it. Again, if you made this in PowerPoint and you saved it as a single image, then all of this would move together. So that's what you want to do, all right? Make this stuff in PowerPoint wherever you can, and center your figures. Other than that, yeah, again, these are the types of things you want to center this stuff. This looks pretty good. Now, there was something in these tables. I had a quick look at some of these last night to try to help me remember some of the bits that I wanted to point out, and I made some notes. So if I go into here, this is my edited version that I prepared earlier. We talked about all of that. We talked about all of that. Okay. All right. So this is something we haven't spoken about yet. This is a little bit specific to civil, but I'll point it out here anyway. So the civil project was about building the water tower to try and reduce the energy of a household, and they were reflecting on how much energy was used to produce the materials that they made their tower out of. The favored material for Group 2 decided was pine timber due to its low cost and low embodied energy of blah. This is not something that you can say by itself. Yes, wood has a low cost when compared to things like steel for the same weight, okay? But something like steel is significantly stronger, and thus you need significantly less of it in order to hold up the same load. So you can't say something like this in this context. It is misleading. It's not necessarily true. What you really need to be talking about is if we had a design made of steel and it could use a tenth of the material, would it then have more or less embodied energy? That's what is required for you to make that comparison. So be careful about overstating something like that. This is not necessarily true. Okay? Be very, very careful with that. So coming into here, material selection. Material selection is appropriate for a whole bunch of different projects, and it's something I want you to really think about, all right? Because there's a whole bunch of this type of issue in here. Like saying that the timber is light, well, yeah, but it's much weaker than the steel, so is its strength to weight ratio actually better or not? Have you run those numbers? You need to, okay? Yeah, you don't get to say that mild steel is heavy. Yes, it has a high density, but because it's stronger, it might actually be able to be lighter. So be very, very careful about the way you do a material selection process. It really shows, okay, this person doesn't understand what they're talking about at all. Should the table of contents and subheadings also be double-lined 08? They can be single, but I still think they should be 08. I still think that. It's not explicitly stated, so it doesn't super matter, but I think it looks better if you give them a spacing after. This random chunk of text is not double spaced. All the rest of it is. But this one random chunk of text that's just floating here is not double spaced. So that needs to be double spaced. This is one of the reasons I would suggest you always print before when you do your proofreading, because something like this will stick out like a sore thumb in a printed version. It's super obvious. We talked about the formatting there. Okay, so this is introducing something called Strand 7, which is a computer program that the civils used. Now, most of you have never heard of Strand 7, so this is a thing that needs to be introduced. Now, we see some strand results down here. Do we get an introduction to what Strand 7 actually is? It doesn't look like it. It looks like an assumption has been made that the reader understands what Strand 7 is. So if you've used something like a particular computer package or a particular piece of hardware or something like that that your client may not have seen before, you should definitely be making sure you're introducing it. So is there a style that they are using for big headings and a different one for subheadings? I would imagine so. This should be heading 1, and then let's go and find a subheading. Heading 2? Yeah, heading 2. Okay? That's the easiest way to do it. Every time you have a different heading, you just use a different style. I don't think I made any other notes in here. Oh, I did. The structure will be brought in a box in 30 pieces that are labeled. Assembly instructions, including in index. I think that's meant to say appendix. Details how to correctly assemble the product, which will take between 20 and 30 minutes. So this is an area where I do believe they were intentionally giving a window, which is fine. But on test day, the civils had to test and get an exact number for how long assembly took, and that should be quoted as well somewhere. Now, I do believe I read more of this and I found it further on in the report, so I think it's fine. I just flagged it. Do dot points need to be double spaced? Check your discipline specific requirements. Some of them have specific information there. If they don't, it can be single spaced. Okay, so here we're into an area, and I've been asked this question a few times. So you've got a major heading, marketability of structure, which is totally fine. You got a subheading, which is fine. And now under their subheading, they've got another tier of heading. So the way that this was in their original one, if I just flick back to that one. Oop, did I go too far? I did go too far. Here we go. All right. So major heading, subheading, subheading. Could you make this 8.2.1 and make it a third tier heading? Yeah, you definitely could. There'd be nothing wrong with going down 3 levels in a report of this size. 3 levels would be the most that I would expect you to go down. I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with going down 3 levels here. But if this is the only time in your entire report where you've gone down to that 3rd level, you may not want to make it a 3rd tier heading, and you almost certainly don't want it to appear in your table of contents. You could just make it italics. Okay? So coming to this level and just going, here we go. Let's just make these italics. Makes them stand out to the reader. Makes me know that you've broken this up into a bunch of different bits. And seems to, like, I think that this is quite a nice way of laying this out. I think that this was good. I think that this was an intelligent way to do this. And I think the thing that you wanted to do here was just make these italics, and I think that looks really nice for you. Also, another thing, Shift Enter might help you a little bit with some of your spacing. Or maybe not. Maybe not that much. It's fine. Yeah, it's pretty similar. It says in our project brief that our audience is a second year student who hasn't taken Edge 1500. Yep. Does that mean we can use technical terms but have to introduce resources such as Strand 7? You definitely have to introduce anything specifically taught to you in here. You can use technical terms like stress and strain if they're things that you believe your audience would know. They're pretty much generally acceptable first year terms. Things like stress, strain, velocity as a vector. These are things that you could assume your audience would know. Cool. Other than this, I think that this is pretty good. Obviously, I didn't read all of this in excruciating detail. The only other thing that I think that needs to be pointed out into this report is this. So, section 11, evaluation and analysis of design, is 1 page long. This is arguably the most important section in your entire report. This is where you demonstrate that you understood your process from start to finish. You understood why it failed. You understood how you should do it differently. This is a very condensed 1 page. There is a lot of information in it, but bear in mind, this is an incredibly important section. Okay? So make sure you haven't missed anything in it. It's very important. And then a final summary and conclusion. Good, you have one. Cool. References, good. You've got references, they're in, they appear acceptable. Sweet. Appendix, this is your assembly procedure. That's all good. Please remember, this will have to be something like Appendix B. Appendix A is your reflection. All right? For everybody, Appendix A is your reflection. It has to be that way. And then you can have Appendix B, C, D as you feel you need, but Appendix A must be your reflection. Assembly procedure, all good. That was something the civil students specifically needed. Design thinking process. This potentially needs to be split out to be a different appendix. I don't have an issue with it being in here or any of this being in here, but I would be making a new appendix, all right? So I would be making Appendix C, the design process, whatever, and chucking this in here because it is a separate thing, right? Your referencing style is either prescribed in your discipline-specific work because it's different for all the different workshops, or if it's not prescribed, then you can pick whatever you like, as long as it's a commonly accepted referencing style. Should we introduce the audience to what Eng 1500 is about? No. Don't do that. Don't do that. All right, cool. So that was the civil report. The next report that I've got is an Enviro report, and this one's probably a little bit more polished. And there's a few, but there is still a few things that we can pick on in this one because it's quite nicely polished. I'm going to pick on more subtle things. All right. And they're different things to what were in the last one. Some really nice things about the last report was they had their units pretty much immaculately perfect, by the way. I don't think I spotted an incorrect unit in that entire report. So that was really, really nice. This one's got some incorrect units in it, so we'll be able to talk about it. Do headings have every word capitalized? Probably not. I don't think I would care either way, to be honest. I don't think I'd care either way. For mechanical, how do we get hold of wind speed achieved and power output that Sean wrote down? Don't worry about your power output. It doesn't matter. But Sean, I will get Sean to share details from test day. Share test A details. No, we're just going to go through this Enviro report, and then I've got a ChemEng one that I haven't looked at yet that I can look at cold if people want me to. We were asked to describe what happened to the system at 60 degrees to the wind, but what if we didn't get to test the system at that angle? Describe what would have happened in that scenario. You should essentially know what would happen to your turbine in that scenario. Did you have an adequate yaw system or not? Is basically what that question is asking. All right, so if we have a look at this report, here we go. So this is the report that we looked at before. There's a whole lot to like about this report, but there's a few things that we're going to point out as well. So they haven't written their abstract yet, which is totally fine. They also haven't written their conclusions yet, which again is totally fine. That makes total sense to me that they've written everything and they've left their abstract and their conclusion till last. Sweet. Some other things that they haven't done yet that I assume are coming is they don't have the Eng 1500 title page in there yet, which they need. Their report was called Eng 1500 report, so that their file name needs to be fixed up. So you've got to be careful. You've got to get the right file names, okay? Make sure you've got the title page in there. Make sure you get those things correct. You can put whatever you want in an appendix. Don't assume we're going to read it, but you can put it in. Will the details for mechanicals test day include the weight and time it took for our team's projects? Maybe. You should have recorded those as well. I can ask Sean. I assumed they were things that you knew. But yep, I'll ask Sean, not a problem. Can do that. All right, so looking at this report, we're missing a few of those things. If we come into here, this looks pretty good. It's Times New Roman, it's 12 point, it's justified, the margins are narrow. All of these things are good. I like all of that. We don't have anything in our list of tables yet. Now, do we have any tables in our report? No. Doesn't look like we have any tables in our report. We have some in our appendix. I would leave them out. So personally, I would kill that. I wouldn't bother with the fact that you don't have any tables in the body of your report, and the ones that are in your appendix are pretty self-explanatory. I wouldn't bother with a list of tables in this case. I'd get rid of it. Keep Alex Gregg happy. No tables. Totally fine. All right, so I'll zoom in a bit. Sorry, I forgot. What I want you to do is... So one of the things that is consistently an issue throughout this entire report are our units, okay? So if I have a look at this, and I have a look, I'm just skim reading looking for units now. So what I see is 2 microns. Okay, 2 microns. 1/1,000,000th of a meter, 10 to the minus 6. All right, I don't actually have any issues with the fact that they put an explanation in here. Obviously, microns were not a particularly common, obvious thing for them, so they decided to explain it. Cool, great, that makes perfect sense to me. Where we hit an issue, though, is that says microns written out in full. Down here, we see milliliters not written out in full. So you got to pick one. You're either writing everything out in full or you're writing nothing out in full, all right? So what you want to probably do in this scenario is insert micrometer. Now, if you thought the word microns was worth introducing, that's fine. Put it in here. Microns or 1/1,000,000th of a millimeter. All right, so that's totally fine. But if we're gonna be units, we're generally gonna want the abbreviations. Also, here, 10 milliliters, we should have a space. Now, something interesting, I actually thought that this was going to allow me to prove a point. So this says 10 milliliters, right? And it's right at the edge of a line. If I was to put a few more letters in here, there we go. See how it's split? 10 and the milliliters up. So now they're 1 on one line and 1 on the other. There's actually a way to solve that. What you do is instead of hitting spacebar, hit Control-Shift spacebar. It looks like a perfectly normal space, right? But it's actually called a non-breaking space. And when I put more letters in here, it will move them and keep them together. So Control-Shift-Space is what a better way of doing that. If you haven't done that, don't worry about it. It's super not a thing I would care about in a first year report at any stage. But if you're pulling your hair out, ever trying to get that to work, Control-Shift-Space is how you do it. Is this being uploaded? Yeah. All the live streams are pretty much uploaded. This will be uploaded, I think. Oh, actually, no. It'll only be uploaded if I can get permission from everybody's report who we looked at in order to upload it. So I will ask for permission. And we will see. Obviously, people are under no obligation to have me tear their report apart live on stream to be recorded forever. So if they don't like it, then it'll just be the live stream, okay? All right, now we come down a little bit further. We start to see some more of these types of issues. So, this looks pretty good. Milliliters is good. 2 minutes. The abbreviation for minutes is min. A measurement given in milligrams per liter. Good. Okay, that's all pretty good. And we see this figure, which is the only figure in your entire report, which is in 2 parts that you haven't put A, B, C, D in for. Every other one in your report is beautiful, but this one, you need to go in and put parts A and B into. The other thing that you need to do is come in here and tell me what parts A and B are. All right, so the consequences of algae blooms in this lake, not a problem. A, showing the green algae. I don't know. I have no idea what this is. B, showing dead fish. I think they're dead fish. Yeah, they're dead fish. Cool. You need to explain what these parts are. All right? Cool. But that's good. Again, figure captions, if you wanted to change that style, you can come into caption, you can modify, you can make them. If you've been asked to format them as body text, then you can do that. And that will update all your figure captions. Okay? So that's good. Good question here. ML or M little l or M big L? Should leaders... yes, no, good catch. So this is leaders with a little l, and this is leaders with a big L. So which one are you supposed to use? The rule says that if it's not named after somebody, then the abbreviation should be lowercase. All right? So leaders isn't named after somebody, so it should be lowercase. And this is totally acceptable, okay? And it is the rule. However, it's reasonably common to put in a large L. Why? Well, how different does a lowercase l and a 1 look? They look pretty similar, right? And so this can cause confusion around something like 1 liter or 11 liters or something like that. Did they mean to write 11 liters and leave the L off? Did they write 1 liter and put a lowercase l in and forget their space? This can become very confusing. And there are some fonts where a lowercase l and a 1 are an identical character. They're from typewriter fonts where they wanted to use less keys. So sometimes they are actually genuinely identical. So that's why big L is commonly used for liters, even though it is not necessarily technically correct. Personally, I like big L, but that's me personally. If you want to check in with your workshop leader for that, I would consider that perfect, totally valid thing to check in with. Are we able to write left and right for dual figures without labeling? Yeah, you are. Okay, so in this figure, you could totally write left, right. The reason that I wouldn't do that in this case is because when you come down here later and you've got 4 parts to a figure, left, right, now you got to say upper left, upper right, bottom left, bottom right, which you can do, but it starts to become messy. And so if you're going to label them A, B, C, and D, then refer to them as A, B, C, and D, totally fine, especially if you're going to do that a lot of times through your report. If instead your report is simply single figures the whole way through, and there's like 1 or 2 occasions where you've got a 2-part figure, using left and right would be totally acceptable. Okay? Just try and be consistent with it, no matter how you do it. Cool. Okay, so that's a bunch of stuff on units. The main thing with units is to be consistent. So this is the big issue with something like this, is you could argue to me whether it should be a capital L or a lowercase l. What you can't argue is that you used one at one time and a different one at a different time. That's definitely not an okay thing to do, all right? So be consistent. Now, another thing in here is this is not a correct cross-reference. So a measurement is given in milligrams per litre. Fine. In February 2021, lake in New South Wales saw consequences of this firsthand. Reference. Good. Really good. As seen in figure 1. Good. Like they're referring to the figure in the text. Good. All of this is fine. I wouldn't have put this in brackets. I would have just put that there. I wouldn't have bothered with the brackets. Also, this figure 1 has been written manually, okay? So what will happen is if we, for some reason, decide that we should have had another figure up here somewhere, and we insert another figure, this caption can be updated automatically, which is great. It's a wonderful feature, but this will not be updated automatically because it's not a cross-reference. If you instead went into here, cross-reference, and you cross-referenced a figure, you don't want the entire caption, you want label and number. Word will remember this, you only have to set it up once. Pick your figure, insert figure 1. Now this is an automatic thing in Word, and it will update when you tell it to. All right, and it will also allow you to do things like control click, and it will take you to the correct part and all sorts of great integrated things. Now this can do more harm than good. If you're at this stage, to the author of this, who is essentially finished, like they have this beautiful report here, I would not go back and mess with this now. All right, you're close enough. Don't worry about it. Look, you're going to have hundreds of these references. Don't go and mess with them all now. Just leave them alone. But if you're starting out, getting set up to do this correctly can make your life a whole lot easier in terms of auto updates and stuff like that. So yeah, don't mess with it now. But to the author of this, don't mess with it. You're fine. To anybody who's just starting out, consider doing this. It will make your life easier. Big L is the best L? Yeah, I agree. Big L is the better way to do it. How in depth should we go for technical info? As detailed as the first report, should we be explaining everything or just the essentials for our final solution? You want to make sure that you can demonstrate to your marker that you understand the topic, super important thing, and then demonstrate that help the reader understand your evaluation and justification. Okay, so in order to have a proper discussion of why did our thing work this way, how did it fail, how did it succeed, what separated it from other teams, what background information do you need to tell somebody to understand that? So they're your two goals, all right? Demonstrate to your marker that you understand the field and help your reader understand what they need to understand your results. Is there any other numbers that should be included in the medical apart from moving average or threshold frequency? It depends on how you solved it, but things like sample rate and stuff like that are probably super important as well. Shown in figure A or figure... Okay, do you capitalize this F? I do. Be consistent would be my number one thing. I capitalize it here, and I capitalize it here always, but that's me. I don't know if that's necessarily a law, but that's definitely what I do. Can dot points span over 2 pages? Yeah, it's better if you can work them so that they don't, but it's not the end of the world. It's certainly not like spanning a table over 2 pages. If I've forgotten some details of the project, am I able to ask the team what we did so as to have some details and something to write down? You can discuss with your team, yeah. Definitely don't ever ask to see their report at any stage, okay? As soon as you've seen a report from them, then you're going to really struggle to avoid plagiarism. So don't, and even if they send it to you, don't open it, don't read it. But you can ask some questions and see how you go with that. All right, cool. Back to this. Something that's another really nice thing that Word will do here, if you turn it on, and you do have to turn this on, I think, brown lines can indicate that you have the wrong type of terminology in. So in this case, this is identifying wordiness. So more concise language would be clearer to your reader. 2. Therefore, the biofiltration device is integral for improving water quality to maintain biodiversity and improve the overall health. Yep. These 2 words here, in order, are not required at all. And so, you can get rid of them. And there we go. We cleaned it up. So that's a really nice feature that Word will sometimes do, is find some wordiness for you. Another thing that it will sometimes point out with the brown line is things like abbreviations that you shouldn't be using. Sometimes it'll tell you and it's just trash, but sometimes it's really good. So check them. Don't necessarily believe Word when it tells you it, but sometimes it can be good. Am I allowed to proofread a friend's report who is in the same discipline but a different workshop? Yeah, I don't have any problems with proofing, but I would say make sure both of you have essentially finished your reports before you do that. So here we go. We're liters again. Now we're spelling liters out in full. We want to be consistent. What are we doing? We're picking one. We're going capital L's. We're doing it the whole way through. We're going min. We're not writing it out in full. We're making sure we've got spaces between our units and our numbers. All right. We're making sure we have a full stop at the end here. Now, this person has done their dot points in a different style to the person before. So these are actually fragments of a sentence. So what they've done here is they've basically written a sentence which has a list in it. And instead of this being a list with things with commas between them, they've turned them into dot points. Totally fine. Perfectly good way to do it. The very last one gets a full stop, by the way. That's the correct thing to do. Again, ISO wouldn't care in a first year report, but if you want to know the correct way to do it, this is actually the correct way to do it. And I do believe you put commas at the end of each of these as well. I believe is the correct way to, the most correct way to do that. But that's a totally acceptable way to do dot points as well. Really nice. Yes, that's a good point. If this is the same reference every time, I would do exactly as Alex said. I would reference it once at the end. This is one sentence, and so it can have one reference right at the end is totally fine in this case. Okay. Bam, chuck your spaces in. I'm basically just now scanning for things that I can pick out. That shouldn't be a capital. That should be an A. So what am I doing here when I'm doing this? I'm not reading any of the words. All right. I am solely looking for formatting issues. Two spaces there. Now, if I was reading the words, I probably wouldn't find things like, oh, there should have been commas here and you missed your spaces there. It's because I'm not reading the words, I'm only looking for these things. I've got my proofreading hat on right now, right? I'm not doing content, I'm just doing dotting I's, crossing T's type stuff, okay? Should references go before or after the full stop? That's a great question that I don't know in this referencing style. I never use it. I will find out for you because I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. Dot points can go over 2 pages. Yes. So yeah, make sure that you do this to your report at some stage. I would advise printing it out for this process and go through. Don't read the words, just look for errors. Why is Word putting a line under this? Of a dense root system. Yeah, cool. Proofreading things, all right? That's all we're doing. We're looking for proofreading stuff. We spoke about this before. This should probably reference A, B, C, and D, or at least say something like 4 different designs are shown A through to D. That would also be acceptable. I'll find out about the referencing systems. I believe they're after. That is my current understanding is that they are after, but I'll have to find out for you. We've got a space there where we don't want a space. Now, pH. pH is a thing that has not been introduced, I don't believe, in this report. How do I find out? This is the first time I've seen pH. Maybe it was used somewhere else, maybe it wasn't. What do? Well, I control F for pH. 39 times it appears in the report. It's probably not pH every time, but if we go right up to the start at the abstract, search for pH, and we can just scroll through. Okay, it's going to appear in a bunch of words, whatever. There's probably a smarter, faster way to do this, but who cares? This is going to take me like literally 15 seconds. This is our first use of pH, and it is not discussed in any way. Okay, pH needs to be discussed. Cool. Again, you can't assume that your reader understands what it is or why it's important to your particular project. You don't necessarily have to get into the nitty gritty chemistry, but even something like saying the acidity of the water is the pH, or the pH dictates whether the water is acidic or alkaline, might be all you need, but you need something to introduce the pH. This is fine. Volatile organic compounds, VOCs. Yep, totally good. Cleaning and maintenance of this. Okay, so that is part of the sentence, so it goes within the sentence. All right, now I'm going to zoom out a little bit here because we get into something. So in the testing section, what we end up with is centimeters. Never use centimeters. Centimeters are the worst unit. All right, I'm gonna flick to. Here we go. This is the one that I was messing with last night. I'm just making sure I haven't missed anything. I'll circle back to that one. Okay, so pros and cons. Yeah, maybe. We do have a rule that says that we don't use abbreviations, we don't use informal language in a report, and pros and cons are abbreviations and kind of informal. That being said, to say a pros and cons list, it's almost now like a name of something, so I don't have a huge issue with it, but I guess I put this in here as a question around, would you consider this informal wording? Maybe. Is there a more formal way that you can phrase that? Maybe. You could simply talk about a list of positives and negatives, might be slightly safer. If I read this, I wouldn't have any dramas with it at all. But maybe you just want to be careful about making sure that your wording is nice and formal. Liters per second, there we go. This is another units issue. Some more redundant wording, making contact with can just become contacting. Advantages, disadvantages, yep, totally. Spoke about this. Okay, so this is something that I was going to bring up before. I'll bring it up again now. So some parts of this are... Okay, this all looks really nice, and our headings are all numbered lists, and they all have been formatted correctly, and they all look beautiful. But I don't believe these were actually done as styles in Word. I think these were done manually. So I believe 100% of this was done manually, which means they weren't just pressing this and reformatting and stuff. And that's totally fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a 20-page report. If you decide to simply brute force this at the end and come in and go, I haven't used a numbered list at any stage, and I haven't used styles at any stage, and my report is essentially finished, it's 20 pages long, going back and trying to make everything styles in Word is probably more effort than it's worth. You can just brute force this out manually. It'll take you like 10 minutes, and you just manually put everything in. It's not the correct way to start a document, but if you're right at the end, just saving everything and doing it that way is totally fine. It's another thing that I'll do for reference lists all the time, is I'll use the automatic referencing in Word the entire way through. Where are our references? Where are our references? There they are. I'll use automatic referencing the entire way through. But when I get to the end and I'm in a final proofreading mode, I will grab this, I will copy it, and I will paste as plain text. All right? This is now not connected to anything in Word, and I will, or EndNote or anything like that, I deliberately separate it out, and I just do my final check of my references manually at the end to stop them updating and getting all messed up. And there's totally nothing wrong with that, okay? So use the automatic features when they help you. When they don't help you, get rid of them. All right. So yeah, I always get to the end and I always delete my reference list and I just put one of them in manually by myself. The amount of times I have had EndNote crash on me and ruin a document. DSAL is APA. It was spec'd by Simon, APA 7th edition. He's put some information in your specific report outline about what APA 7th edition is. So make sure you give that a check just to make sure that it's doing exactly the right thing. Because APA 7th edition is quite new. It only came out a few months ago, I think. Or, I don't know. Very recently. Okay, so what I wanted to talk to you about was you've got in here a testing, right? So this is testing, and they've done a whole bunch of tests, which is really cool. So test one, test two, test four. I assume there's test three is there, test four, test five. There's maybe a better way to lay this out. So I think we're going to hit like 8 different tests. And I like that this has been done consistently and they've repeated a format over and over and over again. Um, but there may be a slightly nicer way of laying this out. I would come into here and look at this. What's it end up being? Like 5 pages of your report where a whole bunch of marks are going to be put because the way that you did testing was really important to this project. So I would look at this and say, is there a nicer way to do this? Can I put this into a table? Can I do something else? Is this introduction adequate? Do I need to say, in total, 8 tests were performed, they'll be explained in this next section, da 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 da, to make this? I haven't read it in detail, but just look through here and make sure that this is the nicest way you can possibly communicate this information, okay? Again, doing something like coming into here and making our tests stand out. Or maybe in this case, you might make them bold. I also wouldn't put the as seen in figure 4 here. I would put it somewhere else, even if it goes on the next line. I don't know. But I would have these stand out nice and clearly. Oh, I know what I did. I hit shift because I'm an idiot. Yeah, I do something to make this stand out, be nice and clear, be really easy for your reader. So maybe spend a little bit of time with how you've laid your really important parts of your document out. Where are the guts of your work? Where did you do most of your effort? And make sure that's really, really clear to your reader. And please fix your units. Stop mixing units. Make me sad. Millimeters only, no centimeters. Oh, what do you do in this scenario? What do you do when you've gotten this far through your report and you realize you've mixed units the entire way? You control F for centimeters and you work through the 44 times that you've used it in your report and you go and you fix them all, yeah? This is what you do in this scenario. So you use the control F function to help you in this way. All right, this is another one that's interesting in this report. So I'll keep going through. This is pretty nice. I like this. It needs a caption though. This needs to be I know that it has a title, but it's more common that we have to put in a caption. All right, all your figures need to get captions and they need to get a description. So caption it actually becomes less and less common to title these types of things. As a professional, and it's more often that you will have a detailed caption. So make sure you give a caption to this. This is where our font randomly changes back to Calibri. So this is really bad. This is something you never want to do, all right? Find and replace. Okay, yes, if you're lazy, you can find and replace. So Control H, I think, is find and replace. So you can replace centimeters with millimeters. you can do this. You are correct. What Alex is saying is what you need to be really careful of is that you find and replace the correct thing. Um, if you just try and find and replace CM, it will do it anytime you've actually used it inside of a word, and it will totally wreck you. So I don't ever find and replace. I reckon that it does far more harm than good. Um, so I do them manually, even if I've got hundreds to do. Honestly, I find it fast. I did my entire 300-page thesis. I never use find and replace because honestly, I think it does more harm than good. It will take you like it'll take you like 2 minutes to replace 44 versions of CM with MM. Just do it manually to not wreck yourself. But yes, you can find and replace if you're incredibly confident. I wouldn't. Yeah, why is this really bad? Why is this super bad that you change fonts? It's super bad because it looks like you copy and pasted it from somewhere. That's what it looks like. It looks like you grabbed this from another person's report or you grabbed it from a website and you pasted it in, and that's why it changed fonts. Okay? Never ever do this. You will get flagged for plagiarism immediately. I If you did do this, and that's why we're having this conversation, please delete this and fix it for your final report. You just search where you have centimeters using Control F and manually do it. Yeah, that's 100% what I do. Um, I find that I find that so much safer, and it's not hard, right? Cool. So yeah, changing fonts, super scary thing. It's going to get you flagged. Stuff like this, you basically don't want to have abbreviations anywhere in your report ever. They're generally never acceptable. So what you want to do in this scenario is Control F for an apostrophe. Oh, go away, centimeters. Get out of my life. Be an apostrophe. So, that's totally fine. That's not. Great. Do not. Cool. And you can just work through here. Totally fine, totally fine, totally fine. Didn't. Okay, cool. We know that this is a thing, and as soon as you can identify these types of things, you can go through and you can fix them. So what I would recommend everybody does is they make themselves a list. So come through, whether you know these things about you or not, and just be like, all right, when I'm proofreading, what am I going to do? So this person knows that forevermore, whenever they write a report, on their list should be to Control F for centimeters. And then they should make another list. Control F for apostrophes and look specifically for contractions that aren't supposed to be in my report. All right? And every one of you should do this. You should build your list up. And when you're in proofreading mode, you just basically go through and go, all right, this is a thing that's on my list. It's a mistake I know I make. For Dylan, it's the use of disciples instead of disciplines. So I Control F for the word disciples, and I go through and I find it every time I've written it in my report. All right? So I've got a whole bunch of those things that I know I personally do, and you should build up your own list of yours and go through and Control F for them as well, okay? Because it doesn't matter if you make this mistake here. You can fix it in like 2 seconds, right? It's super easy to fix. You've just got to find it. Also, for my referencing list, is it okay to have it aligned left when it's justified? It looks very wrong. Yeah, I don't have a problem with you left justifying your references. Sometimes they get totally messed up if you justify them. Totally agree with you there. I think it's because of the URLs go in as one really big long word, and justifying them is a mess. Feel free to left align your references. Cool. This person also needs to Control F4 minutes and seconds and fix all of those. Ooh, as seen above, dangerous wording. Dangerous wording. All right. So you generally want, and I don't know specifically what this is referring to, But as seen above, once this is a printed page, there's not really anything above it anymore. It kind of makes sense in a document format like this that it's above, but it's not actually going to be above once it's printed out. All right? So you generally want to avoid above and below. Sometimes it's fine, but it can get you into trouble. You generally want to be more specific, as seen in figure blah, or as seen in section 12.2. Totally acceptable way to do it. Be careful with above and below. It can be misleading. All right, same comment that I made on the last one. The evaluation section, justification and evaluation are super important parts of this. Now, I haven't read it in detail, and maybe there's justification and evaluation all through the entire thing. But, and maybe this is beautiful, and maybe this is perfect and it has everything in it, but be aware that this is worth a lot of marks, and you should make sure that it's got everything in it. This is where you get to prove that you understood all of the models and assumptions in the engineering design process from start to finish, and that you followed it through, and you can identify where it worked and where you made false assumptions and they fell down and they bit you on test day or whatever. All right, so evaluation is worth a lot. Make sure you put the effort into doing it well. Conclusions to be finished. We knew that. We knew that that was coming. We were told that at the start, and that's totally fine. That's the last thing you're doing. Be careful. Appendix A is got to be your reflection. So this is going to be Appendix B. And you probably didn't want this to be a major heading. You probably wanted this to be a subheading. So think about how you want to format this appendix a little bit more, but don't waste too much time on it. It's an appendix. Nobody really cares. Okay, some other things macro-wise that are really badly wrong with this report. Turn these suckers on and have a look at this. Learn to use page breaks. Page breaks are your friend. do not put in a whole bunch of enters in order to try and separate things out. Get all of this out of your life. Hold on, I'm going to turn track changes off. Go away. Do not do this. Do not do this. Insert page break. No, I think I messed this up. You're formatting up a little bit on you there. Go away. Insert page break. Page break. Page break. All right. You do these with page breaks. Oh, yeah, page break needs to go on the other side of the section break. Sorry. Also, you didn't need that to be a continuous section break, but whatever. It doesn't matter. Oh. So just make sure that you are using your page breaks, all right? It's going to make your formatting and your pagination, it's called, how things lay out on your page, way nicer. This way, if you come back into here and you want to add another paragraph about how I am the greatest, it doesn't move this around, right? And you can put all sorts of junk into here and it doesn't hurt you in any way, all right? So use page breaks to help you with your formatting. It will make your life way, way easier. Page breaks, scope. Scope doesn't have any numbers in it. I can't remember if we spoke about this or not, but your scope needs numbers. Or do you just not have a scope at all in here? Oh, it looks like you don't have a clearly defined scope. And you should definitely make sure that you have one, okay? Having a good introduction and a clearly defined scope are very important. Make sure that you have one. Remember, your scope bounds your problem. It has to have the numbers in it. How big was this project? Was it a full-scale size of a lake project, or was it a scaled down thing? That has to go into your project, all right? Figure captions, font, we spoke about that, we spoke about that, we spoke about that, and turn on your cues. Yeah, so when proofing, it's a great idea to turn these on. I know they annoy a lot of people, but they'll help you find things like a whole bunch of carriage returns was used instead of an enter. Instead of a page break, for example. So, you don't ever want to see this type of jazz, all right? You can make section breaks not be continuous, by the way, so you can put in a page break, section break. It's an option for you as well. Cool. Okay, sweet. So that's that one. It's been almost 2 hours. Do we want to have a look at a third report in our last dying 10 minutes, or do you guys want to spam me with questions? I'm happy to do either or, but I think it might be more valuable for you guys to spam me with questions, and I'll try to help you with them, okay? For mechanical, it says talk about return on investment. I'm not 100% sure what to do for this. So what I want you to talk about in your return on investment is how long would it take for this thing to pay itself off? All right, so it's going to cost me however many dollars in order to um, manufacture your solution, and I've paid you however many hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop your first prototype. How long will it take to pay itself off? Will it pay itself off? Is it a good idea from a return on investment? If your thing basically barely worked and just went and was really crappy and cost a heap of money, then you would talk about how your return on investment would be hundreds of years and it was not worth investing in. All right? And that's totally fine. I'm getting you to try to make a judgment call. I was not sent any robot reports, so I can't give you one. I would have happily done one, but nobody sent me one. Is there a document for Appendix A reflection? Yes, it's part of your um, outlines. Da 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 da. File. Actually, whatever. Yeah, yeah. This. All right. Assessment 7 essentially starts here. This is your assessment 7. All right. Also, for my reference list, is it okay to... Oh, no, we did that one. Can we look at one more report at the same time as asking questions, maybe? Yeah, I don't have a robot report. I can open the other one up. Got to go to my Eng 1003 class. Oh, good. Great. Cool. I'm glad you were here for the stream. I hope it was helpful. Can we submit the hard copy on Thursday instead of Friday? Yes, I will put the boxes out the front of my office earlier so that you can... Oh, there's already a box out the front. There's already a box out the front. You can submit whenever you like. Okay? There will be boxes for every discipline come Friday, but for now there's just a box out the front. Chuck it in there. Didn't get sent any software ones. Can't look at them. Would have been happy to. Didn't get any. So we just estimate the return on investment, how well it performed, and costed. Yep. Yep. And then make that judgment call. Is that a good idea? Same deal goes for things like the civils. Did this thing actually reduce the environmental impact? Or did you put so much energy into building this thing in the first place that in its lifetime it's never actually going to pay itself off? The world is littered with things like that, all right? Where, oh, we're going to invest in this renewable resource, and you put so much effort into developing it, and it never, ever, ever pays for itself. So that's something that I want you to be able to look at and analyze. Don't don't stress too much about the power output. If it was cheap and it worked well, talk about those things. If the generator setup was better, you would have made more power. Don't stress about the power numbers that you were shown. They are wrong. Okay? So if it spun really, really well and it was very cheap, have that discussion in your report. Okay? Yes, don't worry about the power output. You're all good. Yes, ES315 is my office. You can Google that if you need to. Simply Google me and it will Google where is Dylan Cuskelly's office and it will tell you. Didn't get any errors. So I've not looked at this decel report at all. Other than I deleted a few things out of this page. So I haven't looked at any part of this. So I'm happy to skim read this, and I'm going to give you what I would do as a marker and get first impressions. Don't have any page numbers. This doesn't have subsections in it. It should have subsections in it. this is formatted incorrectly and there is nothing in it, which is fine, but it just needs to be added. This is not justified text when it should be. This is fine. This is fine. Numbered list is good. Units are good. Yeah, that looks fine. Just going to turn them off real. Oh, yeah. Okay, good. This is nice. They've used a mid-level dot to imply megajoules multiplied by meters to the -2, and they've used the correct dot in there. Very good. It's got references in it. They are formatted correctly. I dislike APA, but you have used APA correctly. That's all good. That looks great. Nice. Good, good. You've got a scope. Your scope has got a brief outline of it. It's talking about how big the thing has to be, how much it has to weigh, maximum capacity, 2 meters off the ground. Good. There are some nice numbers in our scope. We've got costs in our scope. We've got lifetimes in our scope. Very good. I like this a lot. I like this a lot. There's a lot to like about this scope. decel is left aligned. You are correct. I apologize for that. That just should not be justified for the decel students. That is my mistake. You are correct. Left aligned. And it was also spec Calibri size 11. Correct. 100%. For the teamwork section, can I mention team members by name? Yes, and you are encouraged to, in that section, mention team members by name. Particularly if you want to be like, so-and-so, Joe Bloggs was absolutely amazing and carried our team and they deserve all the praise in the world. 100% mention them by name in that section. That's kind of why it's part of this report, such that you can separate out the technical bits, which go in the report, and then all of the personal stuff goes in the reflection section. This is good. There's a lot to like about this. That looks fine. Equations in using the equation editor. Nice. Sensible heat. Cool. Cool. I like this. I like this. You put a lot of effort into them. They look pretty good. Be careful with what is meant to be italicized and what is not. I think you're okay, but Simon's given you very, very specific rulings on what to italicize and what not to italicize. So please just make sure you've got it correct. Very good. You didn't use a degrees Kelvin. You just used Kelvin. Maybe check in with Simon about what he wants on liters, how he wants that formatted, because regardless of what I say, it's his call on that one. So check with that. Cool. Cool. Interestingly, grams are actually the most common unit used here. From a chemistry perspective, it is actually grams that get used almost all the time, not kilograms. But, yeah, just be careful about whether you're going to chop and change between grams and kilograms. But yes, grams are more commonly used there. Looks good. You're paid. Oh, okay, you haven't written this section yet. Sweet. And so this is perfectly valid thing to have whilst you're still in a bit of a drafting stage, right? They know they're going to write about skills learnt. They've put it in as a heading and they've left themselves some space to write about it. Great. Makes total sense to me. Okay? So this is a good use of the headings first in that they've come in and said, all right, these are the things that I need to remember to talk about. I'm only partway through it at this stage. But you can start to map these things out a little bit more. And I'd encourage you to map out these sections a little bit more before you start writing them. The other thing that I'd encourage you to do is get some content into these other sections, even if they are just mapping out the structure of them. Because whilst you've done a really, really nice job of the things that you've written, and these look really, really nice to me, you've got a lot to go, right? So make sure you start getting stuff in here. The only comment that I'd make about this is you don't have any images, and you probably should. Figures are a really nice way to communicate information, and it's probably a good idea to put a couple of figures into your introduction to help you display these concepts, particularly to somebody who's maybe not familiar with them. A whole bunch of this stuff is heat transfer. You could probably put an image in of something that is radiating, convecting, conducting to help explain what these concepts are. For the medical scope, there's not a whole lot of numbers. Size, weight. So remember, for your scope, these aren't the things that we specified necessarily in the project brief. They're what you scoped the problem into. Okay? So if you scoped it to be wearable, what does that mean? What does that mean as a weight? What does that mean as a size? What does that mean as a fit and feel? Could it have pointy edges coming out of it or whatever? They're all things that you scoped into the project brief that need to go in your scope. The scope is not just you regurgitating the project brief at me, it's you discussing how you have bounded your problem. Okay? There's also things in your scope for the medical project about who your target customer was. So if your target customer was a doctor versus a rando sports person or whatever, that scoped your problem differently about things like the amount of information that needed to be shared and all that kind of jazz. All right? So be aware, it's not just limited to the project brief said this. Yeah, there's like 9 other parts of your scope as well as that. Definitely include the stuff in the project brief, but make sure you include extra details as well. Can we use information from our first report in the technical info section? Yes, I am explicitly giving you permission to do that. Be aware that that is generally considered self-plagiarism and you can be pulled up at Academic Integrity Board for trying to get the same thing marked more than once. It is generally very frowned upon. I deliberately structured my assessments this way. I am giving you express permission to do so. You may do it in this assessment only. For the discipline-specific part of the D-cell section, says there's no need for Roman numerals at any point. Does that include page numbering? I'm going to get you to clarify that one with Simon. Okay. I'm not going to make a call on that. I'm going to get you to ask that one to Simon. All right. I'm not sure, and I don't want to create misinformation in this environment. Others were asked to put Roman numerals at the start. Simon has the way that chemical engineering reports are formatted is very, very specific throughout your entire degree. Okay? There is one way that you will write reports through your whole degree. It's not the same in other disciplines. So I've given Simon an enormous amount of control to dictate the way in which you are asked to format because it's good practice for you for later. So I'm very hands off there. Please ask Simon to clarify. With table formatting, should we use horizontal lines to split them or use gray shading? You can use whatever is appropriate. What had some? The first report had some, didn't it? Had some tables in it. Civil. This had some tables. I mean, that looks totally fine to me, but gray shading can be okay as well. Be aware that it may not print quite as nicely as you want it to. Have a play around, maybe print a few out, just see how they look. Robot, do we talk about sensors that were not used on the robot? Yeah, you probably want to, in your evaluation and discussion, talk about why you didn't use particular sensors, particularly if they were either cheaper or better, which it's generally one of those two things, right? So compared to other teams and stuff, if you simply don't talk about a sensor at all, it can imply that you didn't understand what it was meant to do. Whereas a lot of people didn't use their RGB sensors because they didn't give them any more useful information than they could get out of an IR distance sensor. And because the IR distance sensors are cheaper, then you really need that makes that design decision for them. But you can only have that discussion if you talk about the sensors you didn't use. It's a little hard to know without seeing your report, but when you make your justifications and your evaluations, you probably want to talk about not just the sensors that you're in your kit, but sensors that exist in the world in general and why you did or didn't use them. Double checking, is it to be in black and white? No, not necessarily. So generally, in academic writing, redundant use of color is frowned upon. Okay? So the fact that this is in color is generally frowned upon. Now, when we get to a figure like this, you don't want to print this in black and white. Printing this in black and white is awful. Okay? So I would put these in as color images and I would print them in color. Remember, we mark the assessment is the hard copy. The soft copy is only there for plagiarism checking and if something goes wrong. So make sure you get a nice quality printout of these, and these should definitely be in color. However, if we go back to our Enviro report, should these green dots be green? No. This should be black and white. This shouldn't be shaded, and these should be just hard markers. Now, can I change that in here? Yes. Okay. Format chart area. Great. Chart title, horizontal plot area. I'm trying to format my markers. I'm not sure if I know. I don't know how to do this. I think you can do this in Word. I don't think I know how to do this in Word. You could definitely do it in Excel. The point is, yeah, you could reformat these such that, there we go, markers, marker options, built in. Yeah, they can be whatever, but I would make them a bit smaller probably. And I would make them black. Cool. And I wouldn't have this shading in this chart. Okay, so take that shading out of it. Arguable whether you should have these lines in here or not either. You potentially shouldn't. You definitely shouldn't have the shading. You might want tick marks, but yeah. It probably doesn't matter that much. I'm probably getting a little into the weeds here, and I probably shouldn't be dragging you into the weeds here. Take the shading out of it. Make sure that this can be printed in black and white. Thus, I wouldn't make them green. They don't help you in any way to be green. It doesn't add any extra information. So I definitely would not have had these be green. So this is a figure that doesn't need color. It doesn't help it to be in color, and thus it shouldn't be in color. This is a figure that desperately needs color because it's a heat map, and thus it should definitely be printed in color. Do we submit the hard copy to uni on Friday as well? Yes. My office before 5 o'clock Friday. There is a box out the front now, and there'll be boxes out the front all the way up until 5 o'clock Friday. You don't have to hand it in personally. Somebody else can hand it in for you. I won't know who puts it in the box as long as it's in the box by 5 o'clock Friday. For the mechanical, the evaluation section says it would be good to compare to other groups' solutions in the evaluation section. Yep. Could that be like, this failed in the final design, however, Group X implemented this, which was successful? Yeah, totally. So that's one of the things that we want you to be able to do. To be like, we tried this design, and this other group also tried this design. They just built it better than we did. So it wasn't that the engineering decision was bad, it was that our execution of this was bad. Or somebody else who tried this and it didn't work out as well. That implies that the success of this was very sensitive to a particular parameter. So you 100% are allowed to talk about that type of stuff. Very much encouraged. It demonstrates your ability to evaluate your design at a higher level and go, maybe you'll turn around and go, even though we did this and we were more successful than anybody else who tried this style, some other teams tried this other style and it was just flat out better, and that's what we should have done. Great. You can have that discussion. Yeah, compare to a different group in a different workshop, totally valid. Compare to whoever else you have the ability to compare to. I don't mind. I'm conscious of the time. I'm conscious that it's already past 10 o'clock. Is Are there any other specific questions? Obviously, the Discord chat is still there, and you can still use the Discord chat. Totally happy for you to do that. I'll try and help you where I can, but this was your best, hopefully best opportunity to get questions answered. When comparing to other groups' designs, were we meant to take photos of their designs on testing day? Not necessarily, no. I wouldn't expect everybody to have photos necessarily. If people want to throw some photos up in Project Flex and then other people can use them, totally fine. But you don't need photos of another team to talk about them if you don't have them. I understand that you didn't get photos of absolutely everything. Oh, I missed a question up here. Sorry, tipped glass. Relating to figures, is it good to talk about a topic and refer to a figure, then at the end of the paragraph place that figure and move on to the next section? Yes. Should more related text come after it? Generally, no. Generally, you would talk about it and then you'd have your figure and then you'd move on to something else. Although huge asterisks on that, all right? It depends on what it is. So if it's something like coming into this, you might talk about it, put your figures in, move on to the next design, talk about it, put your figures in. I would put, for example, all of this up above the figure. 100%, I think that should go above the figure. In terms of something else that maybe was something like this, where you've kind of got one figure in your whole introduction, you could maybe put it in the first time you talk about it and then refer back to it several times. That would also be okay. All right. Sorry I missed that on you, man. I didn't realize. Super helpful? Good. I'm glad you found it helpful. Does the reference list needs to be justified? No, it can be left aligned. Yeah. No, not a problem. Your reference list can be left aligned. It's super messy. Okay. Conscious of the fact that you've got other things to do, such as write your reports or enjoy not having testing to go anymore, I'm going to let you go. What is the best way for me to help you, though, between now and Friday? Is it just to continue answering questions on the Discord, or should we have another 1 hour stream on Thursday night or Friday morning or something like that? I'm happy to just go live and answer questions in the chat for an hour on Thursday afternoon, if that's what people want to do. Or I can just try and answer them in the Discord. May the force be with you as well. Discord? Stream? See how we go? Just got to keep writing. Yeah, you do. All right. Well, look, I can go live for a little while. I'll do my best to just answer in the text chat. Um, but I'll go live on Thursday afternoon, and if there's no questions because we've answered everything in the text chat, then great. We'll be all good. Friday morning, maybe, instead of Thursday night. I don't mind. I'm happy to do another poll and just see what people want. But I'll try and do everything in the text chat. If I go live and there's no questions, then I'll chill out for 5 minutes and then I'll not be live anymore and all good. If there are a bunch of questions, because sometimes it is difficult to answer something in the text chat. So I'm happy to do both. I think it should be fine. It also means if I miss a question in the Discord, I can always answer it on the stream. I'm going to need to ask permission from every report that we saw today to be put up on as a recorded video, okay? So I don't know if this will be replayable or not. That's not my call. That's the call of the people whose data that they kindly let us rip into for 2 hours. So my assumption at this stage is a no, unless everybody gives me permission to upload it. Do we need to hand a hard copy in on Friday? By Friday 5 p.m. There's a box out the front of my office now. You can hand it in early if you would like. You don't have to hand it in. Somebody has to hand it in. A hard copy needs to be in the box by 5 o'clock Friday. However that happens. Thursday afternoon, beers and report stream. Okay, nice. Well, I'm going to let you all go. I hope that you found today useful. Thank you for jumping in and engaging with the stream. Obviously, it gives me stuff to talk about, and that's important. I hope it was helpful to you. I hope it was worth it. I guess I'll probably see a whole bunch of you Thursday afternoon. And I hope that you've had a great time writing between now and then. But I'll let you go. Have fun writing. Have fun chilling out, hopefully, for at least a little while between now and when this is due. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being engaged. I will see you. I will see you all Friday.